What's going on, y'all? Machiavelli Mills TV. Y'all hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. So I haven't done any boxing content in a while, but what better boxing content to make a comeback with than this right here? So Terence Crawford, two-time undisputed champion, right? He's a champion in 4 different weight divisions. He gets on a podcast. I think that's Usman he's talking to. I don't watch UFC or MMA at all, but I think that's Usman he's talking to, right? And Usman he's really close with Errol'S Spence. I think Usman is from Texas, I believe. So he's really close with Errol'S Spence. He got a lot of respect for Errol. He asked Terence Crawford, is Errol'S Spence a Hall of Famer? To which Terence Crawford responds, how? He only won belts at 47, right? And he was never an undisputed champion. Terence goes, he fought Kell Brook coming off an eye injury against Triple G, Gennady Golovkin. Then he was basically saying, like, I told people were saying that my resume was bad and all of that, and look who he fought. He was like, but I told people, if I retired before we fought, I was still a Hall of Famer. And that was true, because Terence had been undisputed in 1 weight class, and he had been a champion across 3 different weight classes at that point. So yes, he would have been a Hall of Famer for sure without fighting Errol'S Spence. But beating Errol'S Spence solidified his legacy 1,000%. in the way he beat Errol'S Spence, because Errol is my guy. But he destroyed Errol and beat Errol from pillar to post. Seriously, Errol had no chance in that fight, and you could tell. Like, after that first round, beginning of the second round, I knew my boy Errol was in trouble. But anyway, let's get back to the conversation at hand. But yeah, I told people if I retired at that before we fought, I was a Hall of Famer. And I don't really, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, I don't really see that for Errol. He's like, I'm a fan, so I don't want to seem like I'm hating, but I don't think he's a Hall of Famer currently. Now I'm not going to berate Terence Crawford for having this opinion, because I've talked about this topic on my channel like 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. And because it had came up before, is Errol a Hall of Famer? I said specifically, I remember me saying that Errol'S Spence, you can make a case for Errol strictly off of that 47, his resume at 147. I wasn't sure though. I wasn't sure. I said you can still make a case for him. But I did say if Errol was to go to 54 and win a belt, hey, I made this video like 1 year ago. If Errol was to go up to 54 and win a belt, like if he was to beat Sebastian Fundora and get Fundora's belt, I said he would surely be a Hall of Famer. He would be a shoe-in for a Hall of Fame, right? With that 54 belt, and if he was to beat, Sebastian Fundora, especially if he was to stop him, right? But then I had people in my comment section like, yo, Malcolm, they're like, is lesser people in the Hall of Fame than Errol Spence Jr. Errol's going to get in. So here's the deal, right? We're going to analyze Errol Spence's resume. Errol Spence, to me, at 47, he had the best resume he had a better resume than Terence Crawford at 47. Not just who he fought, but at the time he fought them. Yes, Errol Spence beat Kell Brook coming off a loss where his eyes or orbital bone was broken against Gennady Golovkin. But Kell Brook was still a monster. He was a menacing dude at 47. Seriously. The way Errol beat him, that was peak Errol Spence. Errol was losing that fight to start the fight. He was getting hit with some shots. But as the fight went on, Errol was like a goddamn Super Saiyan. He got stronger as the fight went on, as the fight was going on, to the point where Errol was getting hit. You could see him get hit, but it was like it wasn't moving him. He didn't give a fuck. And he started chopping Kell Brook down like a tree and stopped Kell and broke his other orbital bone. Not the one Gennady Golovkin broke. He broke the other one and stopped him. In his hometown, his home country, right? When Errol walked into that ring that night, I watched that fight. Errol was against all odds like Pac. Against all odds. Like, everybody was booing him in that mob. He went across the pond and got Kell Brook, got Special K, got Kell Brook up out of there, right? He goes on to beat who? Lamont Peterson. Now, Mont was a very good fighter. He's a good fighter, very good fighter. Mont didn't make his bones at 47. He made it at 40. But beautiful win. Errol looked amazing in that fight. Who he beat? Ocampo. I think Ocampo then had some decent little runs at 54. Errol stops Ocampo, I think, the first round. Carlos Ocampo. Errol Spence then goes on to beat Mikey Garcia. Now, yes, Mikey Garcia came up in weight, but I'm not going to, like, diminish that accomplishment. And let me say this. I'm not comparing Errol Spence to Marvin Hagler. I'm not. But Marvin was at 60 his whole career. He was. Whole career. And he was fighting guys who were the smaller guys who were coming up in weight all the time, and he was demolishing them. So, with that being said, Mikey Garcia dared to be great and wanted to come up and fight Errol Spence. You had guys, like reputable, revered commentators, picking Mikey Garcia. You had the late, great George Foreman picking Mikey. You had, what's my man named? Sugar Ray Leonard, Errol Spence's idol, picking Mikey Garcia. You had guys saying Mikey is too skilled for Errol. He's not going to let Errol, because everybody just looked at Errol as the come forward fighter. They thought Mikey was going to get in there and be on some Floyd Mayweather type greatness and outclass Errol. There was no such thing that night. Mikey's best hope was just to keep raising that glove up after every round. He was getting beat from pillar to post. I know he was pissing blood. The worst thing Errol didn't do is just didn't stop him. But he beat the living shit out of Mikey Garcia, right? A guy that was running through everybody, and everybody a lot of people thought was going to win that fight. Then he goes to fight Sean Porter in a tough, rough, rugged fight where Errol Spence stands in the phone book with Sean Porter. The whole fight, he stands in the phone book with him, right? And he beats Sean Porter at Sean Porter's own game. Sean Porter's style is to be in a phone book. Be in a phone booth. I said the phone book. To be in a phone booth. I'm sorry. That's Sean Porter's style. Rough, rugged, all of that. Errol Spence outlasts him, drops him late in a fight, and finishes the fight strong, wins the fight, right? Errol Spence then gets into the car accident. He gets into the car accident. So certain things are put on hold. He comes back, beats Danny Garcia from pillar to, like, that's the worst beating Danny ever got in his life. Ever got in his life was from Errol Spence. Not from Keith Thurman, not from Sean Porter. It was from Errol Spence. And he had no shot in that fight. Errol Spence then goes on to try to fight Manny Pacquiao. Unfortunately, for Errol, he gets an eye injury. He has to pull out of the fight. Errol then comes back and beats Yordenis Ugas and stops Yordenis Ugas, a man who many felt beat Sean Porter. Ugas also beat Manny Pacquiao. Errol Spence, outside of that part where Errol's mouthpiece came out and Errol thought the ref did say stop. When you look back at the tape and stuff, he said stop. Errol tries to go get the mouthpiece, and then, hold on, y'all. Yeah, my bad, y'all. So, yeah, Errol then tries to go get the mouthpiece after the ref said stop. Or Yordenis Ugas cracks Errol Spence, and then after that, Errol Spence gets stronger and relentlessly beats Yordenis Ugas to the point his eye socket is broken, right? Then Errol Spence goes in against Terence Crawford and gets beat from pillar to post, gets demolished, right? But all of the names and the individuals that I ran off, the way Errol was winning them fights, the way it was looking like I really feel like if Errol would have beat Keith Thurman, that would have given him an even better case. But he refused to fight Keith because when Keith was a champion, Keith did not want to give Errol Spence a shot at all. He was never trying to fight Errol Spence at all until he fell out of favor. He went through injuries. His name wasn't the same. He wanted to he wanted to come back and get his glory back against Errol, which I think fighting Keith could have probably better prepared Errol for a Terence Crawford fight. In retrospect, I still don't think he wins that fight, but I think it would have better prepared him for the fight for certain things, right? Because Keith got a different style. However, I think Errol would have stopped Keith Thurman with them body shots because we all know Keith is not like in the body. He breaks in the middle like a goddamn Pop-Tart. Keith Thurman does. And that's when I saw that when he fought Luis Collazo. And the way it took him several rounds to recover from getting hit with that shot. Right? But anyway, I think with what I just said, I'm trying to think. Even before then, the way he beat not Chris Van Heerden, but also what's my man name? Goddamn, he on the show Pro Box TV with Paulie Malignaggi. What is his name, man? What is that brother's name? I'm trying to think his name. Shit, man. Chris. Hold on, man. Hold on. Damn it, Chris Algieri. Yes, the way Errol beat Chris Algieri, I think that was a great victory. Errol looked like a goddamn force, a blunt brute force in that fight. Phil O'Greco, so on and so forth, but not outside of Phil O'Greco, really. Chris Algieri, that victory at the beginning before Errol is champion, that was an excellent victory, you know. Because Chris Algieri was in there with everybody. Everybody, and was a tough out for real. But Errol showed, I mean, it was a masterclass beating. So I think even with that, I do believe, even with Errol, if Errol never fights again, I do think with his resume at 47, he will eventually get in. I think he would. Due to the guys that he beat. He's beaten, so he beat champions. Ugas, Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia, Lamont Peterson, Sean Porter, Kell Brook. Yeah, I think he got champions on his resume. So, and I think that matters. And at the time when he fought these guys' name and reputation, they were better. Like Sean Porter. Now, Sean put up a very valiant fight. But I'm going to tell y'all this. I don't think Terence Crawford was really motivated. Terence was motivated to destroy Errol's Spence. And that's why his victory against Errol was like the best one. Not because Errol is a lesser fighter than Sean Porter and all these other guys. He's friendly, very friendly with Sean. He really was not motivated to beat up on Sean like that. He wasn't when he fought Kell Brook. Kell had went up in weight and then went back down. You know what I mean, too? So, and at that point, it was years after Errol Spence had already stopped him and broke that other orbital bone, right? So, yeah, I'm like, man, he fought, what's the other dude, man? David Avanesian. And really, truthfully, I think Errol would stop Avanesian. Who else he beat? He beat, what's old dude, man? That Jeff Horn. I never liked Jeff Horn. I really think Errol Spence would have demolished Jeff Horn as well. Even with Jeff being rough and rugged and all of that. He didn't win against no damn Manny Pacquiao. And Errol Spence, I think, would have stopped Jeff Horn as well. Now, to me, with Terence saying this, Terence got to be careful. Because Errol Spence is the best name on his resume. And when you saying that dude is not a Hall of Famer, I think, you know, people can look at it like, man, that's your best win. Now, some of y'all going to say that was his easiest win, which it was, especially at 47. It was. But again, Errol is the most accomplished individual that he fought at 47. And then, I'm trying to think, best win? Well, Terence's win against Yuriorkis Gamboa was excellent because Gamboa's name was solidified at that point when Terence beat him. Terence, his victory against Victor Postal before Errol Spence, I felt like that was his best win. For one of his best performance. No. Sean Porter getting a stoppage against Sean. Whether Sean Daddy stopped the fight or not too prematurely, I think Terence was really still going to beat Sean for real. He was, but stopping Sean was a statement. That was a statement because Sean had not been stopped. You know, regardless of Sean's daddy stopping it or not, he stopped Sean. So that was a great victory. But like Victor Postal, that was a very great performance from Terence Crawford. But Yeah, the most accomplished individual on his resume, especially at 47, is Errol Spence Jr. So he had to be careful about saying that guy is not a Hall of Famer. You know what I mean? Well, it's one thing to say he's not that good and to say he's not a Hall of Famer. So he didn't say he wasn't that good and all of that. He said he wasn't a Hall of Famer. But Errol was very accomplished at 47. Very accomplished. And at a point, Errol was looking like he was walking through everybody. You know, except Terence Crawford. But, you know, yeah. So I think Errol Spence, as it stands, will get into the Hall of Fame eventually. He's not going to have a case like Terence Crawford, of course, because Crawford is a champion across many different weight classes, you know, and he was undisputed twice. Errol was never undisputed, although he held 3 belts. And he beat great competition. He beat the best of the best at 47. Only people he didn't beat was Manny Pacquiao, and that's because of the eye injury, and he had to pull out of the fight. And the only other person he didn't beat was Keith Thurman. At the time, Keith was, you know, his name was his name, and Keith didn't want to fight Errol. Errol wanted that fight, but Keith did not want to fight Errol. So, yeah, I do think Errol Spence will eventually get into the Hall of Fame, though, even without fighting at 54 on second thought. But if he fights at 54 and wins a belt and becomes champion, he's surely going to get into the Hall of Fame without question. That's just how I feel. Machiavelli Mills TV, I'm out, y'all. Peace.